I spoke to Jeff and expect him. I don't see he and Ed. But why don't we at least get started with the preliminaries?
Okay.
And we can get through that. Hopefully they will join us then. So let me start from the top. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance, the Mason District Task Force needs to make certain findings and recommendations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. I'll start the roll call. Robert Chamberlain? You're on mute. Robert?
Hey, Marty. Rob Chamberlain here from Alexandria, Virginia.
Joshua Booth?
This is Joshua Booth in Lincolnia.
Thank you, Josh. Jeff Longo, I don't see.
I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jeff, your name and where you're calling in from.
Jeff Longo from Seven Corners, Virginia.
I didn't recognize you, Jeff, because your screen name is J-Lo.
Yes, it is.
I was looking for her too, but I didn't see her. Dave Nguyen? Dave? Donna Jacobson?
Donna Jacobson from Annandale, Virginia.
Welcome, Donna. William Likos?
Bill Likos from Falls Church.
Ed Feig? Ed? Binod Gupta? Binod? Jan Keys?
Jan Keys at home in Falls Church, Virginia.
Karen Geyer Smith?
Karen Geyer Smith in Fairfax, Virginia.
And Martin Machowski from Falls Church, Virginia. Okay. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to Karen, co-chairman, so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Mason District SSPA Task Force.
There is a motion on the floor. All in favor?
We got to second it, don't we?
Get a second?
Oh, I'm sorry, second.
Donna
seconded it. Thank you. It's been a long day. Any discussion? There we go. Let's do that one. All right, hearing none. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
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 And any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels the emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Track a Plan Amendment page of the SSPA website at https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/planning-amendments/SSPA/track-plan-amendment, or by calling 1-844-621-3956 or TTY 711 and entering the access code 237-294-5139. It is so moved.
A motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Donna beat you.
Okay.
Joshua. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the Mason District SSPA Task Force's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
I have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? Come on, Joshua.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye, raising hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, and I now may pass it back to Marty, right?
Thank you. Before we get started, just want to give a quick thank you to task force members. This, as we will learn later in the meeting, may be our last meeting or could be our last meeting for a while. We will get an update on the mosque application after we complete our work on the First Christian Church of Falls Church application amendment. And I just want to say it's been, a great experience. Again, a little bit longer, I think, than we all anticipated. That this process has been working for over 2 years or just about 2 years. It wasn't intended to run that long, but we find ourselves where we find ourselves. But I just want to thank everyone for their participation and thank the staff, Michael, led by Michael, and others who are with us tonight. Thank all of the applicants, all of the developers and landowners on all of the projects that came before us for their participation in the work that we did. And I want to conclude this by wishing everyone a happy, healthy, peaceful New Year as we move forward. With that, we will get down to our agenda. 2 items on the agenda tonight. The first is the task force discussion and decision on the First Christian Church Falls Church property on Route 7. And the second will be an update, as I mentioned, from the staff on the mosque and the Gibson property nominations. I hope everyone has received the document from Michael and had a chance to look at it. This is as I understand, there were, depending upon how you count them, there were 4 or 7 amendments offered to the staff language. Pretty straightforward. I have not heard if there are other task force members who wish to offer amendments this evening, but we have these 4 or 7 to begin with. Because we are, voting tonight, I'm going to try to hold fairly strict to Robert's rules and ask the task force members who would like to speak or would like to offer an amendment, seek recognition from the chair, and I will recognize you as I see you on the screen raising your hands. And first, let me ask Michael. Michael, do you have any comments from the staff that you'd like to share, either on your ongoing consideration of your own draft or with regard to the amendments that have been submitted by task force members?
Sure, and we'll dive into some of the details as the discussion proceeds. We appreciate all of the suggestions, and I think for the most part, staff is in support of the intent behind the revisions that you all put forth. We will have some discussion about some of the terminology or the terms that were used, but we think we can see a path forward, and hopefully in our discussions tonight, whatever recommendation you all decide on, we can find a parallel in terms of what staff's recommendation is, so that as this moves forward, both of our recommendations are more in line. Yeah, I will make do want to make a quick comment just as a reminder about what happens to the draft plan language after the discussion tonight. We consider our text as draft until it moves through the Board of Supervisors, right? They are the deciding vote in terms of what language gets adopted into the plan. So as it goes through public hearing before the Planning Commission, there may be other changes that could be incorporated. So just don't consider it to be absolutely final tonight. I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that going forward.
Thank you, Michael. With that, I will recognize Mr. Likos. Mr. Likos, why do you seek recognition?
I seek recommendation to put a motion on the floor consistent with the chair's interest in establishing an orderly process for reviewing. That motion being to approve the staff report as amended by the document shared on 1-3, representing the input from the members of the SSPA committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Jeff Longo seconds the motion. Now the motion is open for discussion. Bill, would you like to discuss your amendment?
Yeah, I'll be happy to open it up. First of all, I'd like to mirror, Marty, your thanks to our colleagues on the committee for taking the time to be so thoughtful and to review and to submit amendments to the document. We've spent a lot of time running through a number of issues, and I think they are ultimately reflected in the language, the amended language, particularly the rather complex issues that were discussed related to stormwater. So with that said, I think we have stayed consistent with our initial recommendations from the earlier phase of the process. We've refined the language now to move this amendment forward and to allow it to then enter into the zoning process, where obviously we'll all benefit, as will the community, from more details as the process, as the project moves into the next stages.
Further discussion on the amendment? Karen?
Yeah, I would like some clarification, because there are two documents. We've got the long PDF document, or the what looks like a slide deck, and then we had a PDF of a Word document. Which one are we
The
discussing?
long document that looks like a slide deck from my neighbor, Mark Donert, was submitted to me, and I just submitted that to the task force for your review and consideration. That is not an active amendment to the.
Okay, so just the
So we're just
the
looking at
one-page
the one
PDF that we
pager
got.
that Michael circulated, which shows the amendments that have been submitted to the initial staff recommendation.
Yeah, I am referring to specifically, as Marty said, the one pager entitled Task Force Suggested Revisions to Recommendation.
And I would like to continue my request and to get some clarification on the very first highlighted or second highlighted section from staff. The goal of retaining and maintaining stormwater on site. Could you get some more clarification on that? Because that sounds as if all of it has to be done that way, and that's what we're recommending. And that's what I would like some more clarification on, please.
If I could address that, this is an amendment that initially I had submitted. The way as I understand it, the way it's written, the additional language provides an additional goal, not an exclusive goal, to the three or four goals that are set out there in that sentence. So the sentence reads, these stormwater quality and control measures should be provided with the goal of retaining and managing stormwater on site, minimizing downstream flood risk, and reducing the total runoff volume or significantly delaying its entry into the stormwater and stream systems in the watershed. So this is one part of the strategy, and I understand, and this is a strategy that we have discussed with the church and with its engineering team. We were told at our last meeting that the church has even begun to do soil studies and hydraulic studies to see if that was even possible. So the intent here is not to be exclusive in the language of the plan amendment, but the intent here is to add it as another strategy for addressing the stormwater issue.
And I'll quickly jump in and add before turning it over to smarter people. We have Katie Torgerson and Katie Herman on the call with us tonight as well. We want to make clear as staff what our interpretation of that language might be if or as this comes back through any rezoning process. So technically speaking, the idea of retaining all water on the site is something that isn't feasible. It's not an ask that the county can reasonably make. So we think there's a way to work with the language, but we want to be clear about the way that we will interpret it, that it does not mean the retention of all water on the site, but we consider it as a component of managing managing stormwater. So I think as Marty said, and I'm kind of just wording it in a different way, it complements based on our interpretation, it could complement the language that we have in place now, and not, as Marty said, go add something new or go against that. So,
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, let me first of all thank Michael for the clarification. But to me, in submitting the amended language with you, Mr. Chairman, I think the most critical advancement that we've gone through in the last phase of our discussion was the addition of the phrase "good forested conditions." And I appreciate Katie's rather detailed and patient explanation of that. But I think understanding that to mean the highest standard that we can apply to this project is the most important takeaway that I have regarding stormwater from our last several months of discussion. So I think with that as an understood standard and something that the project can engineer to, meets all of our objectives from day one, to see that this project is as responsible as it can be in managing stormwater and not exacerbating any existing conditions or adding new ones to the adjoining watershed and to the stream flow. So that's my interpretation. I want to acknowledge the contributions that staff made to getting us to this point.
I'm just going to go back to my original question. I don't want someone, I hear what everybody's saying, and the good forested thing that really brings it home. I'm just afraid somebody's going to look in the future and say it's supposed to retain all the stormwater runoff on site. It's not possible to do all of it. And so I don't want somebody to see that as a conflict later on. And if you're confident that that wording will not be in conflict later on, then I'm okay. But if it could be in conflict, I think that's too much of a burden on the developer, and I just don't think it's realistic.
And thank you for that. I think I wanted to add to what Michael was saying. It's not so much, I think it's clear, and it's helpful to have this discussion. It's clear that that's not the intention of the language. What matters less is our understanding of the language, but more what the implementers will understand it to be. And we haven't had the opportunity to have them all review that, but they will review it. And I think we'll confidently be able to explain that it's the task force's view that they would like to state explicitly that retaining and managing the water on site should be one of many tools that should be sought, if I'm understanding, and I'll let others correct me if that's not the intention. And that it's not the intention that be the only way to manage all the water, all of the water. And so I think that's part of what we'll have to do when we develop our recommendation for the staff report to take to public hearing with that explanation, so that if there are additional words that we need to add to make that point clear, we'll work with staff to do that. But this conversation, we'll refer to this conversation to try to explain the task force intent and try to align that with what staff can recommend. Does that seem okay with all the staff and task force and people in the meeting?
Other discussion on the amendment?
Marty?
Josh?
I move to amend this, I've got, so for additional draft task force recommendations, I move to strike, there's 4 words, be transit oriented to. So I wanted to read development should minimize dependency on cars, maximize transit, and so on. Just strike the 4 words, be transit oriented to.
Is that a motion, an amendment to the amendment?
Yes.
I second the amendment.
The amendment to the amendment is seconded by Bill Likos. Is there discussion on Josh's amendment?
And just for the reasoning, transit-oriented is kind of a very specific, kind of a technical term in this area. I didn't mean it, I put forward this this recommendation, and I didn't mean it as like in a very technical way, the way that it might be read.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what words are coming out?
Just the 4 words, be transit-oriented to.
Okay, thanks.
Further discussion? Is it a motion, amendment on the table? All in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? That amendment is carried unanimously by voice vote. Are there further amendments to the Likos amendment? Is there further discussion on the Likos amendment?
Well, but I have a question then. Would we be then voting on the original one or what we just amended?
We would be voting on my original motion as amended by Josh's
Okay.
addition.
This is an amendment to the staff, and then we will have to vote on a final vote on the adoption of the staff recommendation as amended by the Likos amendment.
Likos motion.
Likos motion, I'm sorry.
This
Is
is
there any
Clara.
further
And
discussion on the Likos motion?
I have a question about whether it's appropriate right now for staff to hear more about what the reasoning is for it, for the same reason that we need to be able to explain this to the group of staff. And maybe that's something you'd like to do after a vote, but just to understand, is the purpose just investigating reduced parking need? Is it, I think
as we discussed, we had the discussion on, I'll try to answer, Clara, we had a discussion on our last meeting about the staff recommendation, and we noted that although the task force had highlighted parking as an issue in phase 1 of the SSPA process, the staff did not include any language on parking in its draft recommendation. I think this, if I'm correct, the staff force correctly understood that the parking requirements and the demand drives a lot of the concerns regarding impacts on the adjoining neighborhood, tree removal, a whole host of other issues. And these are 2 attempts to, number 1, see if there's some creative things we can do on parking. Number 2, make sure that we are leveraging as the applicant, as the church in its application, and certainly in the church and in its conversation, have discussed the availability of transit, not only current availability of transit on Route 7, but also the potential for an expanded BRT somewhere down the road, to see if those things can be used and thought about creatively to reduce the need for additional parking. As you know, there's at least the schematic we saw of the development proposal had an additional row of parking added that overhangs homes on Ravenwood Park. And I think this reflects the task force's desire to take a look at that and see if we can manage this development in some way that doesn't require that overhang.
And Marty, can I also
Josh?
respond to that?
Sure.
Okay, so I'd come up with a few words that I thought represented my thinking about this. So my grandmother was able to move into an age-restricted apartment building in the Kentlands in Maryland, and now she's enjoying a really good quality of life, and she doesn't even own a car. And now the house that she used to live in, a much younger family is able to raise their kids there and in the house. So I hope to be able to do that for Seven Corners as a result of this project. So First Christian Church proposal needs to solve a number of different problems as you've seen. They need to, provide homes, preserve trees, manage stormwater, and provide parking. It's hard for me to imagine how they could solve all the four problems to the standards that the zoning ordinance requires without this housing becoming expensive. Managing stormwater is a challenge, of course. My neighborhood, for example, has a detention pond that's really good at detaining water, probably better than the detention pond in the townhouse neighborhood in this area. But my neighborhood is also like half the size of the church property. A similar detention pond would be about as big as the parking lots on the north side of the church building. And so clearly just dealing with stormwater would be a challenge by itself. So we also need to provide enough parking for the new residents. We want them to provide enough parking. But if I'm reading the zoning ordinance correctly, they would need probably almost 3 times as much parking as they have now. And so that's even more parking in an area that's, that has a lot of bus lines nearby, that has pretty good access to Metro. So then what you want to, we can consider that we want to be able to preserve the trees in the area and, of course, actually provide the housing. I'm not sure there's enough land left over to solve all these problems at the same time without making this very expensive. It's just, like people in my generation were struggling to find housing. I'm lucky that I was able to find mine. But I think a reduction in parking requirements is a reasonable trade-off to provide more housing overall for the area. And so that's my statement. If you want a copy, I can send that to you.
Thanks, Josh. Clara, did that give you a flavor of our thinking?
It does. I'm just going to send the link to the video. Share it broadly. Thank you. No, I appreciate it because I think it was a question I got from the first few people that were able to take a look at it. What are they trying to achieve? What is the purpose? Why doesn't the other language cover it? And it's helpful to understand that it's for the housing as well as the church.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I wasn't clear about that earlier either. And so, yeah,
Bill?
thank you.
Yeah, let me just add a comment, and I appreciated, Clara, very much your detailed explanation of the approach as to why parking was not in the original staff recommendation. And I understand that the prioritization of screening, canopy, setbacks, et cetera, you felt would guide the process and the design process to which then parking would be a natural follow-on. So I understand that, and I think that's reasonable. I think the idea, in my view, of having the study referenced here is we did cover it in phase 1. So I think it's important to note for a lot of folks who might have a more cursory view of this process that it wasn't forgotten. Secondly, a study just sets up the more detailed analysis that will occur in the zoning process once engineering and design, et cetera, are known. So I think it will be additive, and it avoids, frankly, what I would think would be almost a worst case scenario where we're setting up a conflict down the road of, well, what do you want? Do you want to preserve canopy, or do you want parking, minimize parking, et cetera? We want it to be, as Josh so well pointed out, this is an extraordinarily complex thing. We want the balance when it comes out. And I think the parking study will add to our ability to, down the road in the zoning process, recognize that the balance is what was struck.
Thank you, Bill. Jeff?
So my only thought, I mean, this is all really, really good discussion, and I mean, I'm okay with the um, with this language that we're coming up with, but I'm wondering if it doesn't add something to not just say transit. We're focusing a lot on transit, whereas I know you know multimodal is something that maybe goes a step beyond it because that's talking about transit. It's also talking about making sure there's pedestrian facilities, and you know so making sure that there's and this is stuff that I don't know if we need to include because it's stuff that that once there's a development plan, I'm sure that the county would require anyways for there to be a sidewalk, in front of the property and stuff like that. But I know we've talked about, the desire for there to be walkability to Seven Corners. And for that, even though there isn't now, we want to see that in the future. So I just wanted to throw that out there that if I was going to change this in any way, I would make it more multimodal oriented rather than just focusing on transit. I don't know if there's anyone else that feels strongly about it. I mean, I'm not feeling so strongly that I'm going to throw a motion out there, but if other people, feel, feel like that's a good idea, we can come up with a motion on it.
I just want to say one thing, Jeff, I think it's really important what you said. Like, yeah, we do need to be able to have multiple ways for these people to get to Seven Corners or to Metro. But, also like one thing that seems to be a common amenity of age restricted, housing like this is some kind of like little shuttle that'll take people to the grocery store and things like that. So maybe they'll solve it anyway as part of their, whatever they do. I don't know the details of the planning, but maybe that'll be part of their proposal anyway. But I don't know if I want to, say that they have to provide something like that. And then, yeah, I mean, there definitely shouldn't be more sidewalks there. It's crazy that there isn't.
And and I would just add that, picking up on what Josh said, that the amendment, the first amendment, with the language in paragraph numbered 1, does include the notion of potentially having dedicated shuttle services, which would take residents over to Seven Corners or down to Colmore for shopping and access to other services. But so we have that in there as well. Is there further discussion on the motion?
Marty, just before we take a vote on it, I need something from Michael because for the record keeping, I need to know how to do this. So I'm using my old form, but I'm changing the date reviewed by task force to January 5th. Is that fine?
Yeah, that's fine.
And then what we're voting on is essentially adopt plan amendment as recommended by staff with modifications, right?
Correct.
Is what I understand. All right. Okay, sorry.
Thanks for, no, that's my fault, Jeff. Thanks. I should have updated that document with today's date, but thank you for doing that.
Right. I would think, Jeff, that we would attach we would check the doc with modifications. We would attach the language to the document. Okay. Any other comments or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Likos motion say aye.
As amended, aye.
The Likos motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Abstentions. Let's do a roll call on this.
Roll call.
Let me start from the top. Robert Chamberlain.
Abstain.
Abstain. Josh Booth.
Aye.
Jeff Longo.
Aye.
Dave's not here. Donna
Aye.
Jacobson. Aye. Bill Likos.
Aye.
Ed Feig. Vinod Gupta, Jan Keys,
Aye.
Karen Geyer Smith,
Aye.
and I vote aye. The ayes totaling 7 with 1 abstention, no nays. The Likos motion is agreed to. So now what we have before us is, well, I don't think we have anything before us technically.
Let me cure that. I make a motion to approve forwarding this. I don't want to read the whole number. I guess I will. Hang on. To make it work, to approve the tax map parcel 51-3125 for the First Christian Church plan amendment to move it forward.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second, Karen seconds. Just discussion, my understanding is what Bill is moving forward is the task force is adopting the staff draft recommendation as amended by the Likos motion.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question. Are we listening to input from the residents who are watching this also before we vote, or?
We have, there's not an opportunity. There's
Okay.
a public participation element here.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Let's do a roll call on that again, as this is our final vote. Robert Chamberlain,
From you.
Robert,
Abstention.
abstention. Joshua Booth,
Aye.
Jeff Longo,
Aye.
Donna Jacobson,
Aye.
Bill Likos,
Aye.
Ed Feig, Jan Keys,
Aye.
Karen Geyer Smith,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Again, there are 7 ayes, no nays, and 1 abstention. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our work on the First Christian Church of Falls Church property amendment. Thank you all very much. And Shelley and Steve and Aaron and others, thank you for being with us tonight. I'll just reiterate, certainly for myself and for members of our community, and as I've said, this is the beginning of a very long process. As you well know, that will have us engaging and re-engaging again over and over. And we look forward to working with you to make sure that we can have a good project that works not only for the church, not only for Wesley, but also for the surrounding communities, not only Ravenwood Park, but also the Vinewood Apartments as well. And as we've recently learned, there are some issues there that need to be addressed. So thank you for everyone. Aaron, you too, and Sarah, thank you. I'm trying to look at all the names on the screen and connect the dots here. The next item on the agenda is task force discussion of the nominations, plan amendments on the other side of Route 7 for the property we commonly refer to as the mosque and the Gibson property. Michael, you want to lead that off?
Sure thing. So we talked a little bit about this at our previous meeting. And I just want to kind of remind everybody or give everyone a status update of where we are in our consideration of the mosque. When we last left off, we had talked about pursuing a transportation operational analysis similar to what First Christian Church had provided for their nomination. We wanted to get an understanding of what the impacts may be if BRT were to come down Route 7 and what the U-turns might look like. When the mosque submitted their scope of work to Wells for that analysis, we found that it was substantially lower than what was originally proposed. So when we started on this back in the screening process, the original proposal included about 160,000 roughly square feet. That included not only the proposed community center, but residential, as well as a small commercial component. Over the course of the process, the residential and commercial component were removed. And now in the most recent scope of work, the community center is roughly about 50,000 square feet. And they're also seeking a modest addition to their current place of worship of about 5,000 square feet. So that's an add of about 55,000 square feet in total. That is something that could be achieved under their current zoning. So the current R3 zoning on the property could allow for that if they were able to meet the zoning requirements. That includes the entire 7.5 acre of their subject property. So not by right, but via a special exception, if they were able to maintain a total development under a 0.25 FAR, which puts them at a total of 80,000 square feet, they could pursue this without a plan amendment. So the question became, well, what is the plan amendment necessary for? What would we add that they couldn't pursue on their own? As a result of that, via communications with both the Mason District Office and our senior staff, we didn't see value in moving forward on the proposal as is. But we do want to use this opportunity, given that so much time has been invested, to get your feedback, your thoughts, and probably draw out some or any of the concerns that you may have, so that we can give that information, we can keep that information as staff, and that we can give that information to our applicants. And that includes, or our nominators, I should say, that includes both the mosque as well as the Gibson property, which I'll talk about in just a moment. If there is a concept in the future whereby the mosque can come to some agreement with the Gibson property, and they come up with a concept that needs to be addressed at the comprehensive plan level, then we can address it at that time. And so our recommendation at this stage, at this point, is to defer consideration of Plan Amendment 0002. The Gibson's property, which was tied to this for the reason of considering a more logical planning area, is also impacted. In a sense, they both need each other in terms of the overall subject area that they need. We don't see staff being able to support what the Gibsons are looking to do on their property alone. Perhaps there is an opportunity for them to think about, in coordination with the mosque, how they both could use that 7.5 acres to achieve their goals. As that has not been achieved yet, their nomination, which is still included in PA 002, would be deferred as well. So that's where we stand. We haven't had a lot of discussion about it. I know First Christian Church, given the impetus, or given where they are in their timeline, we've spent a lot of time talking about it and the stormwater considerations. But we would really like to hear from you, and I think the mosque and the Gibsons would appreciate hearing some of your thinking about their proposal and where it is. If you have just cursory thoughts about how that could work, I think it would be helpful. And if you have any questions about staff's position or where we are, please throw them our way.
There are comments or questions from task force members? Michael and Clara and Katie, I will not forego this opportunity to talk about my favorite subject. As I think you all know, there is a stormwater intake on the other side of Route 7 in front of the Gibson property, which delivers water to the stormwater system that comes through the Vinewood townhomes, goes to the public retention pond on that property there, and comes down into Ravenwood Park, and then down into Lake Barcroft. And that is a concern. And I would recall that when the task force considered the two nominations in phase one, we adopted an identical set of comments as we adopted for the church. Not just about stormwater, but certainly about the mosque proposal has changed somewhat since then, but the development of that property still raises a number of concerns. I know that in phase one, we heard from some of the residents living on that side of Route 7 behind the church property, raising their concerns about stormwater in their neighborhood as well. So I just want to make sure that as you consider this and review this, that you pay attention to what the task force adopted in phase one and give special attention to the impact that any development on that site would have on stormwater issues on the other side of Route 7. Appreciate that. Other comments from task force members? Karen?
I just wanted to say complete agreement, the good foresting, the whole thing. Stormwater is such a big issue anymore that I think what we set up for this one, because of where it's at the top, its downstream effect can be pretty catastrophic if it's not dealt with in the same concern.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from task force members? I don't see any. So Michael, does the task force need to take any action, vote to defer, or we just sit here in limbo and maybe you'll hear from us one day? And
So you'll definitely hear from us one day if anything moves forward. That's for sure. I'll defer to Clara, but I think you all have the option if there are concerns such as you noted regarding stormwater as part of your recommendation. You can put that forward. Staff will make the formal recommendation to defer, and then the Planning Commission, I think, is our first public hearing. That's where the decision would be made. But it would be an opportunity for you to publicly, as a task force, state some of these concerns or log some of these concerns on the public record, if that was something that you wanted to do.
Interesting question. Well, we have not paid a lot of attention to this nomination since phase one. I would ask that in any communication that the staff makes to carry this forward, that you include in that communication the record of decision of the task force in phase one. So that, is that possible?
Sure. I mean, I think what it might not be planning division staff that necessarily communicates with I'm just thinking about all the different ways this could go. This could go ahead with a plan amendment, continue. This could go ahead without the need for a plan amendment, in which case we wouldn't have hardly possibly any involvement.
Excuse me, Claire, I don't mean, can the Gibson property go forth without a plan amendment?
Not with the number of units they were interested
Right.
in, but yes,
Right.
with under their current zoning and planning, they have the potential to do more units than the one unit they currently have on the property.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as Michael said, if they were able to satisfy the zoning ordinance. I don't know, Mike, and I'm also, I think it would be helpful if, I don't know if the task force has any thoughts about what would make an appropriate transition from community center to neighborhood. Any thoughts about building orientation, access? Is it just too, it's tough without a concept to look at.
Yeah, I appreciate the accommodations, flexibility. Maybe Saif wants to comment, but I mean, they've been very accommodating throughout this process, but the perhaps unfortunate side effect of that for this discussion is we really don't have much to respond to. other than, their intention to accommodate what they've heard. So, I mean, it's premature for us to weigh in on details of transition or other things. I mean, I appreciated Marty's comment that if it is staff's recommendation to defer, that perhaps in the staff report it is noted that the steps under the SSP that were taken to date, and that in phase one, there was a recommendation to move it forward subject to, additional information being forthcoming as the project are further developed.
I'd love to think about how we can convey that. I think it's just, I think we certainly can. It just may not, the staff report would be, that we would prepare would be for First Christian Church.
Right.
It could be that we could update the planning commission just on this task force's work, but during a public hearing. Certainly the
We
planning commission.
bifurcated the two. We had separate plans, then we combined them, we reviewed them, then we bifurcated them again. And I think staff can move forward, with clear recommendations on First Christian Church, and can reference then the second part of this now as a separate initiative moving forward and awaiting further input from the property owners.
But certainly the people that would definitely get this communication are the Mason District Planning Commissioner and board member.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And obviously also a clear statement that any development there and any consideration of the issues around that site have to take into consideration the church.
Sure.
What we're moving forward, or what might be moving forward on the church side as well. I mean, it's if I recall their initial, the mosque's initial proposal, there was housing, and that might have addressed the transition issue on the side of their own development. I forget if that was townhouses or into a single family homes, or it was an affordable housing component to it. So it offered different options, and we now seem to have before us as well. So, there are all implications for how the community center is accessed, if it's off of the back streets, if it's, that sort of thing. So I'm not in a position to really sort of feel like I could make a firm judgment without seeing something specific.
Marty, I don't want to put staff in a box here. I think it is fair to recognize, I'm not putting this in the form of a motion, but you could just say that in the review process, that the central concerns on stormwater, parking, and transition ought to be consistent with those identified on the church plan. So I think we could leave it at that level at this point, because we really don't have anything else to respond to.
I mean, I feel like there was a greater concern with that property also on traffic impacts.
Good point.
But I mean, because everything's been in flux, we couldn't get a real good sense of what those impacts were. So, I mean, yeah, we had those other core concerns, but I know that's something. I mean, what does it do to the pedestrian walk, to the pedestrian walkway with, BRT, and we're adding a lot of, what could be a lot of density into a place that's not in it's in between the CBCs. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of some of the thoughts that I've been juggling with, and trying to, figure out. And so that's where my mind was, as as we'd been hearing more about that. And I'm not in a place to give any kind of recommendations, but that's what I've been considering.
That's very good
Let
point.
me ask if I could say for you, I see you're with us. Perhaps if I could ask you a question.
Sure.
I know that when we first began this consideration, you had offered that the nomination that the mosque put in was forward thinking in the sense that your timeline was not immediate as the church's was, and your timeline was 5, perhaps 10 years down the road. Is that still the case, or has the changing of your concept for development, has that upped the timeline? Is that, what can you
Yeah.
tell
So
us about that?
I mean, this is still forward thinking, Marty. We're thinking probably in the 5 to 7 year horizon. Because as we're thinking about community growth, and we're thinking about what we felt was beneficial for the larger community, the community center idea. I guess our transitioning over to community center idea was because of what we saw developing on the First Christian Church site, addressing the affordable housing elements that we were thinking about was needed in the community. But after discussing with staff today, I think what we want to do is huddle with Priscilla and see if there's a way that maybe we address some of what she's trying to do with a proposal that we're trying to do, and then maybe revisit this depending on whether it needs the plan amendment or whether we can approach it through a special exception process.
And Michael, Clara, when is the next round of the SSPA for South County?
Well, I think the point for us, though, Marty, the idea of deferring is that, if we did decide to try to move forward, is so that we wouldn't have to wait for another 4 years or whatever, 5 years or whatever it is, for another SSPA process. That it'll be kind of something that's on the shelf, that could be, if needed, could be revitalized.
That's right. It wouldn't go away. So this isn't denying or recommending against it. We're not rescinding the authorization, recommending that. It really is pending a refinement of a concept that could be picked up again. It just sits.
And would it make sense to suggest to Supervisor Gross that at that appropriate time, she may ask us to reconvene, or she may establish another panel?
So much of it depends on how much time has passed, I think.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes years.
Yeah.
To come back.
Mm-hmm.
So that may not be what you want to recommend to the supervisor.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, I would just go back to my original suggestion, is that we share the original set of concerns that the task force had about the project. Those haven't gone away. If anything, you've seen them sort of come back in the context of the church site. So I would, encourage you to as strongly as you could, and they were identical, I believe, on both properties, and we see how that's evolved on the church property, and perhaps it can evolve, as Karen suggested, with regards to stormwater, as a similar way on the other issues that are addressed in the staff recommendation as we have just amended it tonight. Josh?
Yeah, Marty. So yeah, kind of going off of what Jeff was saying about we've mentioned the traffic was a bigger issue on this side. Stormwater is still an important issue, but like at a high level, we're like some of the concept here was just simply parcel consolidation and changing the usage of this land from single family residential to maybe slightly more intensive single family residential, or some kind of a community center. And I think it might be helpful to think to put forth something about the amount of intensity that would be acceptable in this area, just because any parcel consolidation kind of implies that you're going to build a nice big building on there or something like that, right?
Not unless VDOT will give you the right of way.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Michael Clare, is there any mechanism for our ongoing, perhaps more thoughtful consideration of this issue, or what's your perspective on that?
I think it really just depends on what comes forth, right? If their current scope of their project isn't substantially different, it will still need to go through a review process of some sort, but it wouldn't necessarily need to occur at the plan amendment stage, I guess is what I would say.
Mhm.
So it's kind of hard. It's hard to give an answer without understanding how their scope might change in the future.
Is it fair to say, Michael, that we don't exclude any options if in fact we adjourn this evening without setting another meeting and then stand by for whatever develops to develop and a decision above our pay grade be made as to whether the plan amendment process or another is the more appropriate path forward at that time?
I can say for certain that we will continue to have, based on whatever happens, we will continue to have conversations with the Mason District Office about how best to proceed. And again, that, depends on whatever new scope they come up with. So I don't take any options off the table.
Right. So if we just adjourn this evening, we haven't taken anything off the table.
Right.
Right.
That would be, yeah.
Yeah, nobody's officially disbanding the task force. They just kind of end. And so if the supervisor asks us to invite you to a new meeting that hasn't been scheduled, I kind of like we've done with other unanticipated meetings, we would ask who's available and interested. And
if nobody replied, you'd get the message, right, Claire?
that's right.
I will, in conversation with Penny, certainly suggest that the task force would, I don't want to speak of everybody, but most of the task force would welcome the opportunity to revisit as may be appropriate at a later date if needed. Is that conditional enough?
I think we would certainly welcome an invitation to. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I would.
Fair statement, Mr. Chairman.
Ed, welcome. Please, just for the record, tell us your name and where you're calling in from.
Ed Feig, Annandale, Virginia. I apologize wholeheartedly. I got caught up and I couldn't get out.
That's okay. We've, just so you know, on the church, we have adopted all of the amendments that were submitted by task force members. There was one small language change to the one of the parking transit amendments that Josh had offered. And as I had mentioned to you in an email, if you'd like to submit something, and we'll share this information with you, if you'd like to submit something that indicates your view, be happy to include that as part of the task force communication.
Yeah, no, I looked through it, today and read through it, and I like the new verbiage, and I wholeheartedly agree. I think it was a lot more specific, and rather than give too much leeway in that, I think it zeroed in a lot better. So I'm for the language as submitted.
Okay. If we can, Jeff, if we can somehow in a footnote accommodate that on the formal transmission, let's see if we can do that.
So what I did is I've on the transmission. I mean, I already sent it to you.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. I'll send you back some suggested. I'll send you back some suggested.
I essentially said we approved what was sent out to the task force. I referenced the document name, and then I put in with the Joshua's change of striking the be transit oriented to in the recommendation to, and so.
All right, I'll take a look. We'll work something out just to make sure we have a indication of its support for those amendments. Thanks, Ed. So is there any other business, task force business tonight? Any other comments from task force members? Michael?
Yes, I've kept you guys for 2 years, so I figured I can try to keep you for a couple more minutes. On behalf of staff, we really wanted to personally thank each of you for your contribution. When we take off the badge, we're citizens as well. And I know you all have other jobs and other responsibilities. So the time that you have made and committed to this process, we are very grateful for, and we don't say that lightly. We will, of course, continue to be in communication with you as these move forward. We have not scheduled a public hearing date for First Christian Church as of yet, but I will send that information to you once we have it. And of course, you all, well, given where we are with COVID, it may be in the boardroom or it may be virtual, but we'll make sure that you all are included and you know what's going on. If you have questions about any part of this process or any future projects that the department can help out with, I hope you know that you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and we'll do whatever we can to support you. So thank you for your time. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Michael. Any other comments from task force members?
Would a motion to adjourn be considered? a comment?
I think Ed should make that motion.
Yes.
But Karen, did you have you have a comment or a motion?
No, I was going to second that motion.
Okay.
I defer to Ed.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Just
Is there a second?
second.
Seconded by Karen. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Hi.
Bye.
Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've done a heck of a job.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Happy
Bill.
New Year, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you to all my colleagues.
Thank you, everybody. Hey, Michael and Clara, who do you guys report to?
Well, I report to Clara.
I
Oh.
report to Leanna O'Donnell. She's the planning division director. And she reports to Barbara Byron, the agency director.
Oh, geez. So Barbara Byron, okay, I see Barbara Byron. You don't have like a, can you just send Clara, your boss's email to me?
Yeah.
I want to send some
send it.
kudos.
Oh, well, then I'll
Yes.
especially send it sooner. Yes, I'm.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you all.